Ego's a good thing. Like you can't get anything done without the ego, but excessive ego gets in the way of growth. And so you need to be able to drop that and say, well, I've always thought this. Like since I was 3 years old, I've believed this. But when I look back on my life while under the influence and not having my ego on me, I can look back and go, that's dysfunctional there, that was dysfunctional there, that was dysfunctional there. So maybe I had to reconsider that. Well, that could be a huge body of work, right? That could be something that takes you years of your life to kind of untangle. But you would have never seen it without the drugs. And you definitely would have never had the opportunity to have so little anxiety and be so open-minded towards it. And something like MDMA, like you're only lasting hours, something like ketamine, you're like lasting days, you know.
Can it be done? You said that it can't be done without the drug. Do you believe it? Or is it just accessing a different part of the brain that potentially wouldn't be able to be leveraged otherwise?
Well, I mean, I think you can do it without the drug, but it's very unlikely that you're going to do it without the drug, especially like, you know, a SEAL was a SEAL for 20 years, but he was also somebody who was going to become a SEAL for 20 years before that. So now he's 45 and like all of his life, essentially, he's been thinking and acting that way. So that there's a lot to move out of the way, right? And having been sort of at the pinnacle of a career, like being so successful, and such a small percentage of the people actually get to that level of success, and you've climbed that mountain and you've gotten there, it's really hard to say, well, everything I thought was wrong and that was all crap. Like how do you marry that with saying, I'm going to do everything completely opposite than I've ever done and expect to keep succeeding? And nobody's going to buy that. But what I think what the psychedelics do is they allow you to accept that possibility and be like, hey, probably a lot of what I'm thinking is wrong or what I thought was wrong. So I think it's an easier way to get there. But I've seen people that are just, so Kundalini yoga is like a vigorous yoga that has breath work in it, but people can do it with just breath work. But and I'm not talking about something simple like box breathing. It's like a lot of hyperventilation, a lot of deep, hypoxic holds and all this stuff. And there's rhythms and techniques to all of it. And again, that's secreting DMT in your brain. And so that's having kind of that psychedelic effect. So is that really different? So you're saying it's still very
difficult though.
But yeah. At that point, you're kind of using the same drug that you were taking because by and large, I mean, there's other things involved, but psilocybin, ayahuasca, ibogaine, those all increase DMT in the brain drastically. And that's what the hallucinogenic aspect of it is. And so you can do anything. What people can do is amazing. But like if you want sort of a pre-built pathway and something that you're more likely to succeed with, I think those are really good tools. It's just, I'm just always cautious to emphasize to people like how that is just a tool, right? It's no different than saying, hey, I'm going to give you testosterone and your life's going to change. Like, no, I'm going to give you testosterone and you have the opportunity to change your life, right? A little, like I'm going to give you more resources to make the changes you need to make. And that's what the psychedelics and theogens do.
That's really interesting. Do you think that it affects the military community differently? And I guess the bigger question is, it's not the same, right? I mean, humans are the same, but again, like what you said, is that group of individuals are asked to do things that normal humans are not asked to do. And so when you remove the ego part of it, do you think that it's even more difficult for them to be able to work through or accept than, say, you see ayahuasca clinics, like trips all over, but I almost feel as if it would probably help them the most, but this is probably the most difficult group to really crack open.
So like one of the things I've always tried to do with every modality that came along, so what's neurofeedback, biofeedback, transcranial magnet, transcranial ultrasound, psychedelics, hyperbarics, whatever, like, if it's like, I always go learn a lot about it, and if it's appropriate, I'll do it myself and see like, do I think my community would accept this? Because, the psychedelics can be anything from something super clinical, like, the group Vets, that has that ibogaine program down in Mexico. Well, that's run by Stanford physicians, and it's a clinic, man. You go in there, you're taking a pill, it's weighed and measured, and it's like a dose, and you're in a heart rate monitor, and there's not a lot of spiritual woo-woo stuff, but you do something like ayahuasca, and you have a shaman in there, and they're shaking chicken bones, and they're gonging and doing crystal bowls, and a lot of ritualization. I think it matters the setting that you're in. But in my experience in messing around with this stuff and talking to a lot of SEALs and recommending treatments for a lot of SEALs, or not recommending it, I don't want to say that, but advising and educating them on this. Consulting on this. What I find is that if you do it with your guys, whatever else is going on is kind of irrelevant, because one thing that the guys are good at is adapting to an environment, right? It's just like, we can all adapt because we're all here, and like the safety's here. We're totally cool with all of that, right? And then it also takes your mind off of you, because that's the community. Like, you care more about that guy than you do yourself. You're more protective of him than you are yourself. Like, that's just the way that works. And so it changes the dynamic of the experience. And I've done it without team guys there, and I've done it with team guys there, and it's night and day different. But I would say there's a couple of issues. So one of the big issues, these are like the Vikings that are guarding the gate, and that's all they've ever done. That's what they do. The idea of being vulnerable is ridiculous to them. Why would you be vulnerable? Like, that's when you're going to get killed. That's when you're going to fail at your job. You're never going to be vulnerable. Even with your boys, like, each other's vulnerable, but you're doing it like in a joking, picking sort of way and giving each other a little harassment, but nobody's sitting there really admitting any kind of vulnerability or weaknesses or fears or anything like that. So the community is just designed that way, because you have to be self-sufficient. Like, you have to be really confident and proficient at what you do. And what that requires is almost no vulnerability, right? Like, you have to be, the closest thing to bulletproof that you can be. So that's hard for the community to accept. And that's not just SEALs, but I think SEALs are an extreme example of that. But any special forces guys, any military guys, and probably any first responder, and any law enforcement, and probably any UFC fighter, and kind of that kind of guy.
A certain archetype.
Yeah.